Good day to you, Scott Baker.
Good afternoon, Mikey. 6th of September, 2025. Our field note today, that's our topic for discussion here on Lead Better, is a simple one: leaders who hijack meetings. This is a meeting. I don't think either of us are going to hijack it, best I can tell. And so what are we talking about here?
Well, that's kind of funny because the nature of this meeting kind of sets us up to give us the freedom to hijack it. Like we could take it.
We could.
Right.
But the design of this meeting is for us to apply the field note, chew on it, disagree with it, think about stories from our own experience, and hopefully find some nuggets where we say, yeah, here's how I'm feeling this field note, which is great.
But any version of hijacking this meeting would be pretty extreme.
But if you decided all of a sudden to tell a story that took 13 minutes of our 15 minutes, that would be the demonstration of what this field note is talking about.
Right. Now, when I was a camp director back in the good old days, one of my duties was to...
Hold on a second. Hold on.
See, that's a great way for you to hijack meetings right there.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. One of the duties that I would have was to tell campfire stories. And there's a specific kind of campfire story called a shaggy dog story. Are you familiar with the name shaggy dog story?
Yes.
Okay. So a shaggy dog story specifically takes you all the way around the mountain and eventually comes back, and it ends with a stupid dad joke that you could have just said with a setup and an end, but it intentionally takes you, makes you think that it's real, makes you think that it's an authentic, narration of something that took place. And then it ends with a dad joke that is always going to be a groaner. So taking 13 minutes to tell a story is something I've got experience with. What was that? 45
You've
seconds?
done it. Yeah, you're at 45 seconds. Something like that.
No problem.
Yeah. Now, a shaggy dog story is different than a very elaborate joke that might take 10 minutes, but the punchline is going to come. It's going to be a surprise, and you didn't see it coming. That's kind of like Norm Macdonald used to do those.
Norm Macdonald would sometimes really finely toe the line of whether it was a shaggy dog story or
just brilliant,
a super elaborate joke. And I sometimes felt like he was just making fun of the audience into thinking that it was real, right? The way that, there's a few other people who can do it, but Norm was famous for it.
Yeah, he certainly was. So the problem we're actually talking about here, and as with the case of many field notes and many topics of Lead Better, this is one I've got
the subject. Who is the subject?
Right. Could it be about me?
I don't think.
Yeah. Now I'm certainly been guilty of this at times, maybe even more than a few times. Yeah. But you know what's happening. There's a leader, and the field note sets up the good reason, right? Leaders are often very they're full of passion. They're full of conviction. They like to communicate with clarity. Not all leaders are fantastic speakers, but there is some core of insight or of good judgment, and so they want to bring that. And that energy that they bring to it is a reason why they ended up being a good leader. Yeah. Now, when you add to that this recency bias of, I was just in a meeting, or I just read this article, or I sat next to this person on a plane, or let me tell you the case study out of my last client. And they start to go into that story because they're very excited about it, right? And then all of a sudden, 80% of the meeting time is gone. Well, they feel good. Like, well, I really enlightened everybody. Like they just are very, enthused about the energy that they got. And everybody else is like, well, yeah, but we didn't actually talk about the stuff we needed to talk about.
Right. No, that is an issue. If you are passionate about a certain subject, like feeling like you need to get it out. So sometimes it feels to me, Scott, like you're being accused of telling stories. Sometimes it feels like I may have heard, like in one meeting you say it one way, and in another meeting you're saying it again, and in a third meeting. And so I have the privilege of meeting with you several times a week. And so sometimes by the time we get to like a Friday meeting where it's a full team meeting, I may have heard it 2 or 3 times. And so I'm coming to realize that maybe you're practicing. Maybe
there is a bit of that. Yeah.
And
Well,
so you're wanting to get good at being more efficient with it. And so, but it doesn't bother me because oftentimes those initial meetings are just one or two people. I don't really feel like you're hijacking those.
Yeah. And look, there's a gift there too, because it kind of happened today. Like I gave an example in the meeting that we were at earlier today. And I actually teased in that meeting because most of the people in the meeting had not read the field note about hijacking meetings. Now, we were 80% of the way through that meeting. And I said, I don't think I'm violating the hijack a meeting, but I want to tell a story about something that recently I went through, which I hoped would be instructive. It wasn't actually pertinent to a decision for that day.
Right.
But we were talking about conferences, and I wanted to give an illustration of a conference I'd been to where there's a specific protocol, kind of went into that. Now, I had already told you about it. I'd already mentioned the idea of this a couple of months ago.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I was telling a certain version of that. And sometimes in the repetition is the clarity, not only for the team, but we also say, even in our strategic communications content for companies, that you need to be driving clarity around certain ideas, principles, values in multiple ways, multiple channels, writing it out sometimes in a Slack meeting, sending a link to an article people should read, bringing it up in a in a meeting, right? Talking about it in one-on-ones. You want to be like coming back to those things, and you're not being repetitive. You're actually building in sort of a pattern of that to the point where people believe it. And we know that sometimes also in our organization, particularly, I think this is true just for you and me, if Mikey and I agree on a particular idea, which we usually do, then we're probably sometimes going to have to bring that idea up, sometimes with stories, 8 or 10 times before everybody else in the room is like, well, didn't we start that already? Right? Yes. And then they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And then later it's like, well, of course we want to do that. Well, it's just because we kept bringing it up.
So when you continue to find yourself telling stories, and you, General, I mean, maybe... at what point do you find yourself transitioning into telling the whole story versus referencing the fact that you know that everybody in the room
knows it already
heard the story, right?
Yeah.
Do you keep track well enough to know that you should transition into just a reference to the story?
I think that does naturally happen.
Yeah.
Here, let me give you one productive example. I don't know if we'll be able to pull this and grab it and put it, because I think it's behind a paywall, to put it into a link in the say the podcast link on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But the New York Times recently did an article about Taylor Tomlinson, the comedian, and about how she evolves a joke. So the article follows it, but then there are video clips. Here's how she started telling the joke. It might have been in Boston. Here's how she was telling it in Kansas City.
How she evolves
Texas.
it over time.
And then here's how she ended up before she ended up using that joke in her special. Now, I've gone to comedy clubs, for most of my adult life, and often would go to the Comedy Cellar in New York City. And I remember seeing John Mulaney when he was just starting out. You'd hear him tell a joke, and a month later he's telling a joke, and then a month later that was the pleasure of it, is you were watching the evolution as it got tighter and tighter and funnier and funnier. And yes, that has to happen, we all get tired when Grandpa is telling the same joke or one-liner or story from the war, right? Yes, we've heard that one, Grandpa. But, those things do stick with us, and there's a reason for that.
Yes, right. But if Grandpa if like my father-in-law kind of famously tells the same 7 stories over and over again. And so it's not that he is repeating stories. It's like he's repeating them on every visit, right? So
you froze for half a second. I don't know for everybody else, but you froze for half a second. I thought you were pondering what your grandfather was saying. But
right, no, it's not that he does. The way that he actually tells the stories is fine. It's just we hear them so often, right? Now, if he only told them like once every year, right? And then we might get to the point where like, oh, this is a good one. Everyone listen up to this one, right? But he has a tendency to use the same jokes every single time we visit, right? Every single time we hear him. So
seemingly unaware that he remembers he ever told them before. Right?
No, I think like that's part of his shtick. He likes the idea that he kind of aggravates people with that.
Oh, he does now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, look, we have we have a weekly meeting for our team with the founding partner in our firm, and he has a lot of wisdom and information because he's been doing this for 40 years. And we tend in that meeting to not start with his insights. Sometimes we do, but a lot of times it's toward the end where it'll be like, all right, what else do we need to know? And then he'll kind of unpack 2 or 3 items and maybe tell a story. But there's a balance here, and I think that's actually okay. Like if you can get through. And yesterday we were talking about compressed timelines. Sometimes you want to have the ability to say, we scheduled an hour for this meeting, 37 minutes, we're done. We've covered everything.
Right.
What do we want to talk about? Let's open it up. Let's create the freedom. So maybe if you're a leader who likes to do this because you actually maybe think it's important.
Yes.
And so then compress the timeline on getting through the agenda items, keep everybody on track. We actually have a whole set of content in our main platform on how to speed people up in the proper way, right? And then you open that up. Because honestly, I think even in our firm, and you can tell me if you think I'm right about this, but most often, sometimes with our founding partner and a couple of others, I'm actually wanting more stories, and they seem hesitant to tell them.
Yes.
No, it's like, and sometimes they're spectacular. Like, it's like, weren't you just on another continent with the CEO that everyone in the world knows because they're on every, website and they're world famous, and you were coaching them through a real crisis situation? Tell us about that. Yeah. Oh yeah, we met for a while, and then it was good, and and I had so terrible traveling overseas and having to fly back and. Well, no, tell us more. Right. Yes. So a lot of times we want more stories than fewer.
Yeah. No, sometimes I think that the coaches in our firm who do that, they know what they're doing, and they like the idea of leaving people wanting more.
Yes, correct.
In a lot of ways. And so some of it shows up in presentational style, and some of it just shows up in the way that they interact with people.
Yeah.
I think the real important part of this field note is recognizing that giving a leader feedback that they are unwittingly making the team less productive is delicate and create a highly defensive reaction, right? So that's an important sentence. Like,
how do you communicate to the leader? We want you to shut up for a while.
Yeah, right. So what is the better choice? And then we make the recommendation. The better choice is to set a strong and clear agenda and then remind everyone that there will be time at the end to discuss recent developments and insights. And so just recognizing what that behavior is pretty important, right? You don't want to have to take time to litigate that they're not a good storyteller. You don't want to have the time to, tell me whether or not you think people are enjoying it. Because if you go down that road and you're just talking about the past, people are going to be highly defensive about why they do it, when they've done it, whether or not it's actually making people more productive. Right? There's all kinds of defense mechanisms that are going to come up. So the more important way to do it is just to kind of set the agenda for moving forward. And I think the way you described it with the way that we treat the partner when he's in ours, like no one's frustrated at the fact that he's telling stories, but the power of some of his stories might be just as derailing, right? Sometimes he intentionally needs to, for instance, there was a great announcement, a very exciting announcement that was made about what we're going to do as a firm in April, right? So I was a little bit surprised that they made that exciting announcement at the beginning of our all hands meeting instead of waiting at the end. There are some ways that just the way you structure it, you could hijack your own meeting on accident.
Yeah, because people are now thinking about, I got to go call somebody and tell them about that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, that's the exact thought that came into my mind is like,
right. I'm not paying attention for the next hour.
How I'm going to be able to announce this to my entire family. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, all of this is about being thoughtful. And so I don't think that there are that many, I mean, maybe there are delusional leaders, probably the people that are verbose and tending to take over meetings. They kind of know it. Now, not all of them, but they kind of do. And hopefully you have ones that are at least somewhat self-aware, self-deprecating. I think I've always tried to be that way. Even if I say, I'm going to tell you all something that here's an experience, right? But it's like, I try to do that less and less. Maybe I've gotten wiser, right? Even in our own meetings, this was, just a few weeks ago was the 15th anniversary of a major project I launched. This year was the 20th anniversary of another major project I launched. These were all global entities that still exist. And I could be like, well, back in the day, let me tell you about that. And I could tell you for days amazing, riveting stories, but that wouldn't actually help us.
Right.
But we want to. We're like, oh, and like, I don't even talk about that stuff on the internet, right? So it's like, what's the point in it? So that's the thing. If you're going to be telling a story, if you're going to be sharing something, and I kind of do want a little bit of your recency, but not too much. Like if you come in and you're excited about something, tell me, and then let's move on.
Right. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you.
You're not going to tell us a Shaggy dog story?
No, not at all. I do have a couple ready to go, but let's keep this.
Well,
in 15
maybe
minutes.
tomorrow.
Good. Okay. Sounds good.